Hi everyone, in this video we are going to be working on our third bracelet from this Dollarama bead weaving kit. And the design we're going to be working on today is this heart design just in time for Valentine's Day. So if you've been following along, we have already made two other bracelets from the designs in this kit, and we've already used up two of the ribbon clasps that came with the kit, as well as the lobster clasps and extender chains. So we're out of those findings, as they call them. And so I got these sliding end tubes from Amazon.com. So this is what we're going to use to attach to our loom work. And I also got myself my own set of jump rings and clasps. Lobster clasps. So if you're looking to get your own findings, just know that based on the size of these Dollarama beads, these wider 11 bead row designs are about 23 millimeters. So if you want to cover the whole width of these 11 row designs, then you're going to need about 23 millimeters. So I modified this design a little bit to take advantage of other colors. And the colors that we're going to be using from a modified design is going to be this purple color, pink, turquoise, and gold. So I'm going to flash the design on the screen, and you can take a screenshot and save it to your phone. And two other places where you can get my original redesign is through my Tumblr and also through my brand new Ko-fi page, which I will put links in the description section below, and also I will pin a comment to those links. So my design is not a repeating design like these hearts. If you will notice, my design actually has a center and it goes outwards. So when working with a design where there is a defined center, we have to count the rows of beads so that we will be able to get to our final desired length. And so I have counted based on the bracelets that I have already made that to get to my final desired beaded section length of 5 inches, I need to have 53 rows of beads. So it's actually roughly about 10 rows of beads per inch. So if you're trying to get to a 7-inch bracelet, then I would do about 63 rows. So if you want to do 63 rows, I'm going to include a 63 row or 6-inch design in my image files. So my theme for this bracelet is hearts and little sparkles, and also arrows like Cupid's arrows for shooting hearts with on Valentine's Day. Yeah. The threads that I will be using for this project are my Coats & Clark upholstery thread that is 100% nylon. This is a really strong thread that is resistant to fraying, and it also comes in other colors like red and purple if you prefer those for this project. I'm just going to be using plain black. And for my weft thread, so my horizontal thread for going through the beads, I will be using my black John bead good thread. So this is what it looks like, and this is what the packaging looks like. And I talked about this thread quite a bit already in the tutorial for this bracelet. So if you'd like to find out more, you can watch that tutorial. Okay, so for this first finishing method that we're going to be using for this project, we're going to need to do what's called a continuous warp, which is basically what I have been showing you already for the first couple of bracelet tutorials. So a continuous warp is basically just warping and looping without cutting your thread. So it's not the same as what is given in the instructions for the bead loom. So it's not going to be like this. So as you can see, they have individually cut all the warp strands. So we're not going to be doing that for this finishing method. We're going to do what I've been showing you, which is a continuous warp, which is just looping around. And also for this method, we are not going to double the first and the last strand. So in my first two bracelet tutorials, I put 2 strands on the first and on the last. For this method, we are not doing that. It's just 1 strand per warp. So I'll show you that right now. So to put on my warp, I'm going to tie 2 knots. So just a double knot to secure my thread. Like that. And then I'm going to count 6 to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And also from the bottom, middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now it's centered. So I'm going to loop my thread, and then I'm not gonna double the first strand. I'm just gonna go directly to the second slot and continue on until I get to the last one, and the last one is also going to be a single strand. Okay, so this is the 12th strand, and as you can see, they're all singles. So I did not double the first one, and I did not double the last strand this time. And so to end this, I'm just going to loop it around a couple times and tie a double knot. And right now, again, it's very loose. So to improve the tension, I'm going to shove a Sharpie in there. And now the tension's pretty good to start weaving. Okay, once again, I will be using my thinner good thread for the weft for this project. And I'm gonna cut myself a good length of thread. I would say I like to work with longer strands of thread. So I'll probably put on like 5 or 6 feet instead of the usual 3 to 4 feet. And that's because I want to avoid having to add too many threads in the middle of the project. So one thing that is going to be different with this project and the way we're going to be finishing this piece is we are not going to be weaving in our weft threads until after we've already dealt with our vertical warp threads. So in the tutorials for the past 2 bracelets, we have always just been finishing off and tying off and weaving in our horizontal weft threads before we even dealt with our vertical threads and taking the bracelet off the loom. But this time we're not going to do that. We're going to do reverse. So we're going to deal with the vertical threads first, and then we'll deal with the horizontal threads. So just remember that, and we can go ahead and start with putting on our beads. And same thing as before, I'm going to tie a single knot, a simple overhand knot, leaving this much of a tail and putting the rest of my thread under all of my vertical strands and putting the end of that longer strand through my needle. So this is a size 10 beading needle that I recommend for this project, and through this needle I have threaded some sample beads. So this is a squarish bead, this is a thinner bead, 2 thin beads, another squarish bead, another thin bead, a squarish bead, couple thin beads, and 3 squarish beads and a relatively longer bead. So the only beads I'm going to be using are the squarish beads, these 3, this one right here, this one, and this one. And I will not be using any of the thin ones, and I will avoid using the thicker, longer ones as well, so that I can get a more even bracelet. So I am going to be working from bottom to top of the design, and also because I am right-handed, I'm going to be going from left to right. So in reading the pattern, I'm going to be going from left to right. The first row of this pattern is going to be all purple beads. So when you're working with a really wide design like this, and it's really hard to put a bead in each space, well, I kind of did it in one shot over there, but I'll show you in the second row what you can do if you're having trouble putting a bead in each space. So for now, I just pushed up each bead up through each space with my finger like this. And this thread is under all of these vertical threads because it's coming from under it. So now I'm gonna put my needle through the top of each thread like this. So I'm gonna go over each vertical thread and through the bead. So make sure your needle is going over each vertical thread. And you want to start a little bit offset from the bottom as well. And I usually just use my needle to just straighten out my beads a little bit. So now I'm going to put my thread under again. So now that we put on our first row, I want to mention something important when working with sliding and tube clasps. And that is that you're going to lose the first and the last row of beads because those are going to go into the tubes. So they're going to be hidden. So you want to put in an extra row of beads on top of your design. But because my design already has an extra row, then I'm not going to do that. But if you're going to be designing and you want to use this kind of clasp in the end, then you want to factor in the extra row of beads in your design and also in your final length. So with this first row, the spacing is not yet perfect. The vertical threads are not yet fitting nicely according to the size of the beads, but we're going to take care of that with the second row. So I'm going to put on the second row. So here's the second row, and in order to not struggle as much to put these beads in the proper spot, we're going to go from right to left. So I'm going to just fit in the first few beads, push that up, and I'm going to put my needle through them like this so that I can at least be assured that the first few beads are in the correct spot. And then I'm going to work on the beads from right to left. So I'm going to make sure this next bead is in its right spot, and then this next bead is in the right spot. There's two beads here, so I'm just going to move them aside. These first few beads are not going to be moving anymore because we already put our needle through them. So it's going to be a lot easier to control putting a single bead in each spacing if I don't have to worry about these first few beads anymore. And this is a good tactic for when you are dealing with a lot of rows of beads and trying to put them in their spaces. And now I'm going to just pull and get these two to tighten up a bit. So when I pull, this space should hold a lot better. As you can see, it's holding without me having to do anything. So now the spacing has been established and it will be a lot easier to put in the subsequent rows. So this is my third row, and although not perfect, as you can see, I really tried to pick out the more squarish beads, which will just help me keep my bracelet more even in width throughout. So I'm just gonna slide them down to their appropriate spaces, and this time it's going a lot faster because the spacing has already been established by the first couple rows, and I'm able to just put my needle through the top, no problem. Alright, so from here we're just going to continue on our pattern, and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to finish our bracelet. Just know that you want to finish an inch shorter than your final desired length. So I would like a final bracelet length of 6 inches, so I'm going to make the beaded section 5 inches. And if you'd like a 7-inch bracelet, then you'll make your beaded section 6 inches, and that is because the clasp will take up an extra inch. Alright, so I've just completed the bracelet, and this is my beginning weft thread and this is my ending weft thread. I only have 2 because I used a really long piece of thread, about, I would say like 8 or 9 feet. So if you added thread in the middle, you're just gonna leave it and you're not gonna weave it in. So we're gonna start taking off the bracelet from the loom without weaving any of these weft thread ends in. And I'm just gonna pop off these knobs, and I'm gonna keep these loops without cutting them. Now for this side, let me zoom you in a bit. For this side, I'm going to only cut the beginning and the end. So this is the beginning where I tied the knot for the first warp thread. And then this is the last warp thread right there, the last one. And also where I tied the knot to secure the last warp thread. So I'm just gonna cut that last one, and I'm gonna keep all the loops, and I'm gonna take off this piece of the loom, and I'm just gonna slide off all the loops. I have the bracelet with all the loops still on it. So let's see, over here is the beginning weft thread where I tied the knot and I started weaving, and then over here coming off of this row is the ending weft thread where I finished up, and I haven't tied any of these weft threads, and I have loops on this side, and here is the warp thread that I started with. So I started like this and loop, 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 loop without cutting, and the very ending has this other warp thread right there. So I'm going to start securing this first and this last row of beads by alternately pulling on the loops and snugging the loops against the beads. I'm going to show you how to do that. So first I'm going to divide the loops into half. So like this. And I'm just gonna pin this down to show you. You don't have to pin it down. This is just for the purpose of this video. And also, I usually prefer to do this vertical orientation, but so that I can get the whole bracelet within the frame of the camera, I'm doing it in horizontal orientation, which is the same orientation as the video. So let me zoom you in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this loop, which I think will pull against this warp thread. So I'm just going to take my plier and I'm just going to start pulling to see which one it moves. Okay, so it's moving the correct warp. So as I am pulling this, you can see that the loop is getting smaller and smaller. When I'm almost done, I'm going to be very careful, and I'm just going to pull really, really slowly. So I'm going to pull very carefully until that thread is snug against that bead. And I'm not gonna pull anymore, or else I might end up bunching this bead against the bracelet. So you can see that the thread is snugged up against that bead over here, right there. That thread is snugged up against that bead. So now, because you were pulling on that thread to snug up this loop is going to be longer than the rest. So we started by pulling this right thread. So now we're going to find the left thread that is the next thread up. So I'll show you that. Alright, so with this thread snugged up against that bead, I'm going to alternate. So I was pulling on the right and now I'm going to pull on the left, and I want to pull this thread that is on top. So I'm just going to pull that, and it is pulling another loop. And now I'm just going to very carefully snug that loop onto that bead. So the reason why I'm alternating is because I want to make my way this way and also make my way this way. And the goal is to just have two really long threads at the very end. So two really long warp threads at the very end, and we're only going to need to weave in two ends. And these loops that have been snugged up don't need any further finishing. So they're done. So now I have pulled on this thread and snugged up this thread over here. So I'm going to start pulling on the next thread up, which is going to be this thread. So that is going to snug up the left side. And if you see that another loop has going through the current loop that you are pulling, you just want to free that so that you don't accidentally catch another loop in the loop that you're pulling. So when I get to a small loop, I'm just going to carefully pull that and snug it, but not tighten it too much. So now I have snugged up this loop by pulling this loop. So the next thread I'm going to pull is this one on the left. And the more you pull, the longer your loops are going to be. And that is normal. So now I am at my very last loop on the left side, see? So I'm on my very last loop and I have one last thread to pull, which is this ending warp thread, and that will get rid of this loop. And I'm holding my bracelet down for stability and snug that up. So you're going to end up with a really long warp thread, and you can save this for now. So now that we're done working on this half of the bracelet, I'm going to work now on this bottom half. So over here I can see that there is a loose loop going down this row, and then if I follow it to the left, there's no loop. That means that this is the next loop that I want to snug down, which means I have to pull this left thread. So I'm going to start pulling now on this next thread, and it's going to start pulling on the right side. And snug that down. So I just pulled from the left, so now I'm going to pull from the right. So after pulling on all the loops for either ends, we're going to end up only with two weft threads coming out of the sides and two warp threads that are really, really long. That is a result of the accumulation of all the loops that we have pulled from either side. So there's actually a lot you can do with this warp thread. You can make little fringes, you can make little cute little scallops, you can make little picots, but we'll not do any of that right now. We'll probably try that in a future tutorial, but for now I'm going to keep it simple, and all we're going to do is we're going to start to weave in both weft threads and these two warps. So I'm just going to start with the warp threads because they're quite long and they're just getting in the way. So I'm going to cut the warp threads to just maybe about 6 to 8 inches, just enough for me to weave in without going through all this thread. So I have this much and this much left, and that's more manageable to weave in. So the first thing we're gonna do is deal with the warp. So here is a warp. So this is the path that we're gonna take. So this is the warp running through on this side. So we are gonna skip this bead, this first one, and we're gonna put our thread here and in between two beads. And then we're gonna go under the top weft thread. So you know how there's two threads running horizontally, a bottom one and an over one? So we're gonna go under just the top one for this thread bridge, and we're gonna start going up and putting this thread under all the weft top thread bridges, and we're gonna go up maybe 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this whole time we're not putting this thread through any of the beads. We are just going in between the beads under all of this thread bridges. I'm gonna put this thread under this thread bridge, and I'm gonna go through the beads this time and exit somewhere in the middle. Not the end, but somewhere in the middle. And then I'm gonna do what we normally do, which is to zigzag. So I'm gonna go up, tie a knot, make a zigzag this way, come out here, then go up, tie a knot, then go through the beads again. And then this time I'm just going to go up and make one last zigzag, and I'm gonna end here and come out here and cut off this thread. Here's the left one, the left warp thread. I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna skip this bead and I'm gonna go through 2 here. Then I'm gonna put this thread under this weft top thread bridge, and I'm gonna go up under all of the top weft threads. Up, up, up. Now because these beads already have a thread running through them, I'm not gonna stop here. I'm gonna stop a little further up. I'm gonna stop somewhere up here and come out here, only so that I'm not filling these other beads with more thread, because the upholstery thread is kind of thick. And so that thread is not going to fit in these beads because these other ones are already full of the other warp thread. So I'm coming out here. So now I'm gonna put this thread under this weft, top weft, and then I'm gonna go through these beads and I'm gonna come out somewhere here, and then I'm gonna tie a knot, and then I'm gonna zigzag this way, come up, tie a knot, zigzag again to here, and then go up 1 and then come out and cut. And this one is going through beads like that. So to weave in this weft thread, you're just gonna do what we normally do, which is to go this way and then come out somewhere here, tie a knot, and then zigzag, and then come up, tie a knot, then zigzag. And because this weft thread is way thinner than the warp thread, because we're using the John Bead Good thread for the weft, you can go ahead and make a circle if you want and go this way again. So I'm going to show you that now, but I'm only going to show you one of each. So I'm only going to show you this one, and I'm only going to show you this one so that the video is not too long. So to end, I'm going to take the warp and I'm going to skip the last bead, and I'm going to go through a couple of beads. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm coming out of this third bead right here. So I'm going to catch the top horizontal bridge right there. So if you will remember, there's two threads running through the rows. There's one from the bottom, and then you circle around and you go over again, so there's one on the top. So you're just going to go over the top horizontal weft thread. So you're going to go through one, and you're going to go through another one. So actually, I've already done the other side, and I went up 8 or 9. So I don't want to also go up 8 or 9 on this side because I was zigzagging and tying knots, and because my upholstery thread is thicker, I want to go further than 8 or 9 just so that I am not zigzagging on the same beads. Alright, so now I've gone up a bunch of horizontal weft threads in the middle of these rows of beads. So I'm just gonna pull my needle up, and I'm coming out of this horizontal thread, so I am just going to go through this gold, and I am going to make a knot on the thread bridge up one row. Once I've made a knot, I'm going to, so I made the knot on this thread bridge right here. So I'm just gonna do a left turn. And then I'm going to catch another thread bridge right there. And I'm just gonna make another knot again. And I'm going to make a right turn. So I'm just making a zigzag. And finally, I'm just gonna make one last zigzag on the row on top. And that should be good, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut my thread. So now let's deal with our remaining weft threads, which are the threads that we use to put the beads on and weave in these rows. So we're just gonna thread our needle, and we're just gonna do what we usually do. So we're gonna go down one, I'm gonna exit somewhere there, and let me just flip this bracelet. I'm gonna pull, and then I'm going to catch a bridge, tie a knot, then I put a knot there, so I'm just gonna go back in through a few beads in the opposite direction. And then I'm just going to go up one, so I'm coming out of this bead right here, this one. So I'm just going to go up one, and I'm going to catch a thread bridge there. And tie a knot. And I'm only going to do 2 knots. Then I'm going to do some zigzags and circles. So And once I've done my circle, I'm just gonna cut my thread. So now that you have woven in both of the left threads and both of the warp threads, let's go ahead and start putting in these end tube clasps. So right now, these clasps are a little bit closed. I'm just gonna open it up a little bit because these beads are a bit large and it's hard to get them on when they're half closed like that. So with these clasps, the way they work is they have a little slit over there, and you would just slide the last row of beads in, and this is going to prevent your beads from falling off because this is narrower than the beads that you are sliding in. Now you can just choose to slide it on and fold this over without putting any glue in it, but I do recommend to use glue so that if your bracelet is just a little bit narrower than the tube, then it won't slide around like this. My bracelet right now, because of the thicker upholstery thread that I used, ended up being exactly 25 millimeters. So I can slide it on and it's not gonna slide around because actually I need to shove a little bit of this extra in there, like real good, and it's exact. It'll be perfect once I close this flap. So actually, I don't really think that I need to glue here, but I personally still prefer to add some glue in there for extra security. So I've put some plastic down and I'm going to get out my nifty Aleene's original tacky glue, and I'm just gonna apply glue to my thick, strong needle. So this is not your beading needle, this is just a thick needle, and I'm just gonna put some glue in there. And I'm just going to put the glue all over the inside of the tube, and I'm going to try to avoid putting glue in this open area because obviously you don't want your glue to be coming out of that spot. And if you think you need it, you can add a little bit more. So I like to add a good amount of glue. Not to the point where it's gonna squeeze out when you put the beads in, but there's a good amount of glue in there. And then I'm gonna start sliding my beads in carefully. Just slide that in. And I'm going to start closing up this flap with my pliers. So I'm gonna start closing up this flap with my pliers like this. And when I have it partially closed, I'm just gonna use my table to tap this closed. So let me just do that. So thankfully I was able to fit all of the beads in there and get it fully closed, and as you can see, the width is perfect. So this is a 25 millimeter tube, and so my bracelet ended up being 25 millimeters wide when I used the thicker upholstery thread. So that's done, and I like that it looks really clean and very sleek. So I'm just gonna let it dry for about half an hour and we'll finish up with some clasps and dangles, and I'll show you how to make a extender if you don't have any more chain. Okay, so we've waited for the glue to dry, so it's time to wrap up. As usual, I made my own dangles and I have 5 jump rings, and I have two clasp options. I have this lobster clasp, which is the same kind of clasp that comes in the kit, and I also have a toggle clasp. So a toggle clasp is a lot easier to put on and take off, but a lobster clasp makes your bracelet adjustable because you can attach this clasp to any link in your chain. Since I measured this bracelet to fit my wrist, then I'm just going to show you a new option for clasping, which is a toggle clasp. So to start, I'm going to take one of my jump rings, and as usual, I am going to twist it open. So we're not going to pull it apart. We are going to twist it open like this. So now it's twisted open, and I'm going to slide it into one side of my tube clasp, and I'm just going to drop down one side of my toggle clasp. And I'm going to twist it back closed. Wiggle it a little bit to make sure it is fully closed. Like that. And then I'm gonna make a chain using all of my jump rings. So if you don't have any more extender chains like this, you can just put a bunch of jump rings together and make your own chain. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just going to put these two jump rings together, and I am going to drop down one of my charms and close that up by twisting it closed like this. So I'll show you that again a bit more closer up. So I'm just going to twist it open like this, and then I'm going to link it to my charm, and I'm going to also just add another charm, because what I'm trying to do is make sort of like a little charm chain, since I'm not really going to be using this as an extender. It's just to decorate the bracelet. And I'm also just going to attach another jump ring. So this is the first link in the chain. So I've made a chain of 4 jump rings. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now I'm going to attach both the other side of the toggle clasp and my bracelet. So this is what the bracelet looks like after I put it on with the toggle clasp. So for our next project, we are going to be working on this diamond design, and I might also modify it, but we'll see. And yeah, thanks again for watching, and I will see you again next time. Bye!